In this video, we're going to take a look at Walmart stores versus Cockrell. So this case is from Texas Court of Appeals. It happened in 2001. I have the citation here. If you want to look at the entire case and read all the court's language, you should. It's not that long. We're going to be covering essentially the facts of the case, the legal issue, the rule of law, and then we're going to skip to the conclusion of the holding in this case. So a lot of the analysis we're going to skip over, and I hope that you are intrigued and want to find out exactly how the court got to its final decision. So on November 6, 1996, and take note here that the decision, the holding, was in 2001. But in 1996, Carl went to a Walmart store. He went with his parents, and he stayed there for about 5 minutes, and then he decided to leave. A loss prevention officer saw him and was watching him the entire time. His name was Raymond Navarro, and he stopped him on his way out and asked him to come back to the manager's office. And once he was there, he asked him to perform a number of tasks that were extraordinarily invasive. First, he told him to pull his pants down, and then he put his hands between his shorts and underwear, shook them out. Nothing fell out at this point, but he didn't stop there. He also asked him to take his shirt off, and Cockrell raised his shirt up, but there was a bandage underneath, and Navarro wanted to go further. He wanted him to remove the bandage, and Carl was trying to explain that it's there to provide a sterile environment because he just had surgery and there are surgical wounds. He had a liver transplant. Someone else's liver is now in his body. But Navarro insisted, and so he took off the bandage. There were 2 other witnesses. This is actually a very good policy for Walmart. So Jay and Nancy were also Walmart employees, were also there in the manager's office. So that way the jury got to hear potentially 4 witness testimonies, not only the plaintiffs, but 3 Walmart employees. In any event, Navarro, after this detention was over, he apologized and he let Carl go. Let's look at false imprisonment and see if the facts might support a claim. So here are the 3 elements in Texas. Now, keep in mind you're reading about false imprisonment in your textbook. These are the elements in Texas. It's not that they're different. This is just the way courts have articulated them. So if you look at them side by side, you'll see them maybe a few different nuanced words used here and there. But these are the 3 elements. First, it's got to be on purpose. It's got to be a willful detention. Keep in mind this is an intentional tort. Second, this willful detention has to be performed without consent. Consent is a very powerful defense. So we need to make sure that consent didn't exist. Third, this without consent, willful detention has to occur without the authority of law. And that may look like a number of things. We're going to cover particularly the shopkeeper's privilege because that's what the court gave to the jury. Keep in mind, in a false imprisonment case, if the alleged detention was performed under the authority of law, no false imprisonment occurred. So in this case, because it was essentially a shopkeeper scenario, the court gave the jury a particular instruction to further explain the law. And this is the instruction verbatim given to the jury. When a person, number 1, reasonably believes that another has stolen or is attempting to steal property, that person has legal justification to detain the other in a reasonable manner and for a reasonable time to investigate ownership of the property. Keep in mind, I said reasonably or reasonable 3 times. So did the judge. That's what the jury got. Neither Raymond Navarro nor any employee at Walmart actually saw Cockrell steal anything, no merchandise. So what does that look like? Well, Navarro could have personally seen him do it, or maybe a front-end manager might have seen him secrete some merchandise into his pocket and then told loss prevention officer. None of that occurred in this case. But Navarro says, well, I had 2 reasons for suspecting him of stealing from us. First, he was acting suspiciously. Second, he had a bulge under his shirt. Well, what did he give as facts? What did he observe that was suspicious? I'm going to be a little facetious here because I think this is probably the way the jury interpreted it. And then I'll go back and show you how, well, maybe Navarro was acting in good faith. So this is what he says he saw. He was in the women's department, standing close to a rack of clothes and looking around, like every other human in Walmart who was shopping. Later, he saw him looking around, again, he's looking around, and walking slowly by the cigarette aisle. and then he passed out of the store. Now, I'm being a little facetious here, but that doesn't really amount to suspicious to me. We weren't there, so let's take the good faith side of the interpretation here, a charitable interpretation. Well, it's not that he was looking around. It's that he was in the women's department. He's a guy. It doesn't look like he's actually shopping. He's just kind of standing close to a rack, and he's not really looking at the clothes right there. He's looking above, around. He's checking people out. He just looks, maybe his arms are doing gestures that may look furtive. And then he walks by the cigarette aisle, and he's not really looking for cigarettes. He's looking around at other things, and he's walking very slowly, seeing if anyone else is paying attention. So maybe he did look like he was acting suspiciously. The jury probably believed the earlier version of that he was just looking around, he's waiting on his parents, nothing crazy is happening here. It wasn't really reasonable to believe that he had stolen anything. This is important because the jury got to make that decision. That means the trial court level, the jury made the decision. They weighed the credibility of the witnesses and the kind of weight to give to the evidence. The Court of Appeals doesn't do that. They just look to see if there was sufficient evidence that a reasonable jury could have decided the way it did. And this is what they held. Court of Appeals held, number 3, sufficient evidence supported a jury's award of $300,000 for mental anguish suffered by the customer. Now, this is just the mental anguish damages. Likely there were other damages in this case, but these were complained of at the Court of Appeals level. They also found that there was sufficient evidence that he was assaulted by the security guard, and then also he was falsely imprisoned by the store. So I'm leaving out the analysis. I hope that you go back to the actual case and read all of it. But this is very expensive. That is, this is a very expensive mistake to be made by a single employee when a customer walks in 5 minutes and it turns out to be at least $300,000 in the negative, in the red, because of the decisions that were made by employees of this particular Walmart store. As we're looking at other torts and crimes, for instance, keep in mind that this can be applied, will be applied in the context of business. And so as you're learning the elements, keep in mind in your head, think about ways this could apply. Retail store makes a lot of sense. And then also, one last thing, this is one reason why stores employ off-duty police officers at the front of stores. If an off-duty police officer pats someone down and is unreasonable, it might be the case that they, immediately upon apprehending the suspect, go on duty, and then they have something called qualified immunity, and it's this sort of intervening protection, and Walmart can't be held accountable. Whereas if it was a non-law enforcement officer, security guard, or security officer, or loss prevention officer, it would directly tie back to Walmart. So something to think about as you're reading through it.